Hi, I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, we're looking at the new National Tourism Policy Statement. The document encourages local councils to work on the facilities and services that draw in visitors to help double the value of tourism by 2034. Tourism Minister Louise Upston's statement says it's their job to market their towns to visitors, attract them with events, provide amenities such as venues and parks, and make sure the planes can land and the cruise ships arrive. It describes these roles as important.
It's our job through this tourism policy statement to look at how do we work better together, central government, local government and industry, to better ensure that we can grow the visitors, but also ensure that we have an amazing experience for every visitor that comes, and local communities see the economic benefit of those visitors.
But hang on, under pressure from the government to keep rates down, cities such as Auckland have been cutting events or not bidding for them. Just 2 years ago, at the local government conference in Wellington, this was the messaging from then local government minister Simeon Brown.
What we're saying is we want to see councils focusing on the basics. There's very clear responsibilities they have around rubbish, roads, water. Those are the clear mandated responsibilities. But ultimately, if they're going to spend money outside of that, we're actually going to say, well, there should be price caps so that ratepayers who ultimately are bearing the burden and bearing the brunt are not just constantly seeing their rates bill go up.
And the Prime Minister has been happy to hammer that message home repeatedly and pointedly, telling the councils assembled at the brand new $180 million Takina Convention Centre they needed to cut wasteful spending and focus on core services rather than nice-to-haves.
We've seen councils get distracted, and so we're making it very clear. We're just making sure that any gross misspending on non-core stuff that doesn't make a difference to people's daily lives at a time when the whole country is challenged.
Kind of nice to have. Is it a convention centre? Is it a bike lane? Is it who makes the choice?
Well, again, that's why we want to change the Local Government Act so that we actually are very clear about infrastructure delivery and service delivery.
Do you think this represents a swivel from them? I mean, up till now it's been all, local governments aren't delivering you fair value for money, your rates are too high, we're going to put a rates cap on. It's all been big stick stuff. Do you think in the process of doing this report that there has become a new understanding about what local councils provide?
I have been told that this minister, which is why I'm actually really happy with her, is the best minister of tourism that we've had since John Key. And the reason is that she's actually listening.
This is Rotorua Mayor Tanya Tapsell.
So, yes, we are seeing a swivel, where before it was, councils are the bad ones. And as you said, you're spending too much. So they're trying to rates cap us to 2 to 4%, right? If you removed the waters, which they already are, the three waters, drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, and then also remove roading, another key thing. Most of us are at 2% anyway. And what's that 2% paying for? It's paying for the libraries and the museums and the pools and the event centres and the airports. From a local government perspective, it is really good that the government is recognising the broad range of services and investments, by the way, that councils do deliver communities. So whether it's those museums, stadiums, haven't even touched on the airports, which we also provide, we play a really crucial role. We have lacked that detail in the past when the government said, cut your costs, and I'm going, well, how am I going to keep this airport open?
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing through this tourism policy statement is a much greater understanding.
Tanya gives Louise Upston's report a solid 8 out of 10 for its acknowledgement of the things councils do and the tools needed to raise money to do them. More from her later in the podcast. The tourism policy statement spells out clearly that major events attract international and domestic tourists and get the economy going. It specifically mentions the City and Regional Deals Initiative, which establishes long-term agreements between central and local government. So far, they've been signed with Auckland, the Otago Central Lakes region and the Western Bay of Plenty councils. The deals promise to unlock funding and resource opportunities, such as that bed tax that Auckland's been agitating for, which the city may or may not get next year. But Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown described his deal as underwhelming back in May.
The day after we're signing it, they announced we're going to have a rates cap. Then we've got Sale GP last week where we are joint funders of that, where they make a decision, a stupid decision, to pull their 2.5 million, without understanding what they were doing.
There is an amendment bill in the pipeline that updates the Local Government Act of 2002 to set out the purpose of local government, prioritise core services and council expenditure, and increase accountability. Labor opposes it because it narrows councils' roles to infrastructure and regulatory functions. It doesn't talk about the importance of councils in fostering vibrant, resilient communities. It says it relegates libraries, cultural facilities and social services to optional nice-to-haves. This report talks about events, museums and galleries, public spaces and visitor infrastructure being foundational to tourism. But Upston told us her plan is wholly in line with that amendment bill.
It's very comprehensive and it does some important new things. So I think it does indicate a potentially significant step in the maturation of the whole sector.
Lincoln University Emeritus Professor David Simmons is a tourism expert. He's helped write previous tourism plans and liked what he saw this time around.
I think the most important thing really is that it has for the first time really reached out to and engaged territorial local authorities in tourism policy and hopefully implementation. Now, some of the early plans, just looking back, I recollect one of them had of its sort of 45 or 48 recommendations, 40 of them were directed at territorial local authorities. Now, why are territorial local authorities important? Well, quite simply is that we may promote largely at a national level and we may talk about the national economic gains, but the real point of focus for tourism management is where does the tyre or where does the foot hit the road? And in that sense, territorial local authorities are right at the front of that. So when a tourist turns up, whether it's in a rental car, camper van, coach, or even on a bike these days, what they do require is parking. They have a big impact on infrastructure, particularly water, and then waste streams, both liquid and material waste streams. And obviously they're attracted to places because of amenities. So they're drawn by museums, they're drawn by parks, gardens, esplanades, and the general amenity values of a place. And in the background, of course, in a high-risk country such as New Zealand, they're also dependent on territorial local authorities for the management of risks and disaster recovery and the like.
David says tourist management needs to be where the tourists are. On an average night across the country, there's a tourist population the equivalent of a city the size of Nelson here.
So we've got an additional city, about our 10th largest city, on the move every night. And so at a very important level, tourism is fundamentally urbanising. It just creates more volume, more pressure on infrastructure, and that is felt very unevenly over the numerous territorial local authorities that we have in New Zealand. So it is most important that territorial local authorities are engaged in the management of tourism. So they're not only, and then unlike central government where these functions are separated between, say, a Ministry of Tourism and a tourism policy group inside MB or the Department of Conservation, you have both marketing and management side by side in territorial local authorities. So they're both enabling tourism on the one hand and managing it on the other. So it's quite a complexity for territorial local authorities to have their heads around tourism and be on the front foot in terms of really enabling the two core parts of what makes tourism work. Excellent visitor experiences and a really well put together host-guest encounter.
Yeah, and I think that's been acknowledged in the report, which is interesting because this government has spent most of its time thus far telling local government to pull its head in to keep its costs down and stop raising rates. So does this mark a departure in that messaging that, yes, tourism, domestic tourism particularly, is important and local authorities have a huge role to play in it?
Look, I think that's its absolute strength. It does acknowledge that. What therefore is the main concern is what does implementation look like? Because at the same time as we have this policy statement, we have a push to restructure territorial local authorities. We have talk about capping rates increases. And in the midst of this group of visitors who simply sort of don't get to vote. And so they won't be as active in lobbying or representing themselves. And unless we really talk about the governance and implementation of this, then there is a concern that in spite of the very good structures that have been built, it might just go nowhere. But the simple point of all of this discussion is you can't just talk up tourism and expect places and New Zealanders to absorb the pressure. So just to loop back to where we were at the start, we have a more mature framework in place because it's got the key players involved: central government, local government, and the visitor industry. But what I'm not seeing yet is the resourcing of that as to how it will be enabled.
Tanya Tapsell's had some input into this policy statement, both in her role as Mayor of a tourist town, but also by representing provincial councils on Local Government NZ.
In the past, there have been lots of bumps. We've received policy and we've gone, well, how is that going to work? And even just recently, with the government's push to councils and focusing on core service, it wasn't clear where economic development, let alone tourism, sat within a core service. So receiving this policy statement, seeing that the Minister and government have taken that on board, you know what, we're pretty happy. But now it's just looking into not only considering what tools we could have in the future, but actually delivering them. And that's the exciting part we're looking forward to.
Well, it's exciting to hear a mayor say that they're happy with the government, because there's been a lot of kind of pushing responsibilities on the local government without any extra funding. So does this go some way towards acknowledging that?
I think that word funding is really crucial here. What this does is it goes a long way towards establishing what has been long sought after additional tools and revenue support. So what we have seen through the policy statement, finally, after many years of advocating, is looking at not only potentially accommodation levies, previously known as bed night tax, but also short-term accommodation registers. Now, that's the Book of Batches, Airbnbs. These are issues that many communities and councils across the country have grappled with. How do we balance growing tourism while also having local input and support and no unintended consequence? So whether we're able to get more revenue, so it's not just reliant on ratepayers paying for this, and also are we able to manage our assets and the accommodation? So if we can get those additional tools in place, I think there'll be a lot more happy mayors around the country.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's notoriously been issues with people complaining about their Airbnb didn't work or their booking.com booking failed. Can you sort of enlarge on that aspect of what the government wants to see? Like, are they all going to have to register?
Yeah, and let's be honest about what the problem is as well. Although Airbnb, Book a Batch, those short-term accommodation, they do provide a really valuable option of accommodation. But for those communities, such as Rotorua and or Queenstown, when you get hundreds and thousands of Airbnbs, Book a Batch, this is actually taking off what could have been a rental, a long-term rental, and the housing supply in a local community. And so where we do see overgrowth of tourism without those support mechanisms in place to make sure that there's a balance, to make sure that the workers in tourism not only have homes that they can live in, but also afford, and that's where that short-term accommodation register is important. Number one, we then can fully understand how many short-term accommodation do we have, but here's the catch, and this is really interesting. Commercial premises such as hotels and motels pay commercial rates, right? And for a very long time, short-term accommodation didn't contribute anything. And so when you think the scale on which they're operating, as we've innovated, it's actually been really crucial that councils such as mine, Rotorua, have introduced a rate specifically for short-term accommodation. The problem is we don't have a register system. So that's what we've asked the government, so that when they sign up to be a short-term accommodation provider, they do have to register. Now, the rate they pay is minimal, but this gets redirected, reinvested directly back into where they're operating. And from what we've heard, since we introduced it in Rotorua, and with a goal of raising $400,000, which we're about to hit, what we're able to do is then reinvest that. And so even those who are providers are not that happy with having to pay a rate, as you can imagine. Now they're seeing the benefit of it because tourism is growing. So, these tools are not a cash grab. These tools are having revenue that's ring-fenced directly back to tourism. We just need the government to implement it.
She blames the ACT Party's anti-new tax policies for delays in bringing practical changes that councils have been asking for, such as the bed tax.
Just to help manage tourism growth and ensure that we can continue to grow with additional revenue. Because, it's a bit of a tough ask on communities such as Rotorua and again Queenstown, when even for Rotorua, population is 78,000, right? We have over 1 million visitors a year. So is it really fair that ratepayers should have to pay for the additional costs? Probably not. And that's where we say it's user pays. What we're talking about here and what we're asking for is only about 2%. Right? It's not going to break the bank. So on average, $200 cost to stay in accommodation at night. What's that? That's $4. You're paying $4 extra. It's not going to break the bank at all. Whatever policy or mechanism you look at, the key here is that communities only have such limited money. The government's saying they're also in financial difficulty. If we do have people that are able to travel, a couple of dollars on their trip that gets reinvested, importantly, back into that community will go a long way. And this is where, as councils, we're honest, we're transparent, we're accountable, we're saying this will be reinvested only back into tourism. It's not going to cover the council costs of, public toilets and roads, but it is going to make sure that our visitors can have an excellent experience.
Tanya says key to the revenue gathering is being able to spend it in the region it's gathered in to improve facilities that benefit both locals and tourists, such as bringing events in or improving museums.
There is a feeling of unfairness, I suppose, when we do have major levies such as the International Visitor Levy went up like $35, now it's $100. Nobody blinked an eye on that. The visitors are still coming through, but we're not feeling that we're seeing that money fairly reinvested back into the regions or where it's most needed. That's where you bring mayors and councils into place and you give us these tools and you will see exactly where this money is coming from. And I guarantee you will also see the benefit because you will have better facilities as locals, better events. And, we're about to reopen our beautiful Rotorua Museum here, by the way, most complex earthquake strengthening project in the country.
It's taken years.
Exactly. And 10 years actually, on time, on budget though, I got to say. But we applied for things like the International Visitor Levy. We were unfortunately declined in that. So we're copying a lot of that cost as local ratepayers, but international and domestic visitors will benefit. Now, if we had these levies in place where we can reinvest locally, we wouldn't be sweating so much when we send out the rates bills to our locals, that's for sure.
What else do you like about this? Because some of the things that are mentioned in it, growing nighttime attractions, Rotorua already does really well. So what do you like that's either a new idea or it's sort of a rubber stamp on what you're already doing?
What I do like about this is it has identified the importance of iwi and mana whenua. Now, that is reassuring with some of the other things that are coming out of this government. But what's important there is if you think about the land holdings that they have, and in particular, what's mentioned in here is public conservation land and waters, from a tourism perspective, they've also had aspirations, but they haven't necessarily had the support to unlock that. And so for places like Rotorua, which have significant Māori iwi land holdings, 14 of our 16 lakes are the lake beds are owned by Te Aroha Lakes Trust. This to me might finally also give them the opportunity. And this is important because when we, not only as Rotorua, the Māori culture capital of New Zealand, but also when we as a country say, well, what's really unique about us? Our culture is really strong in that. You go overseas anywhere and you say, I'm from New Zealand, and they go, the haka. The All Blacks. And so how do we also make sure that as we're continuing to grow adventure tourism, 5-star accommodation, spa health and wellness, we're also not forgetting that our culture, our Māori culture is what makes us important. So that's been really pleasing to see in here.
Yes, although somewhat ironic really that developing Māori culture as an attraction is specifically mentioned in this report. But on the other hand, so much has been done to downgrade Māori culture in our daily lives. I mean, I feel like that's a case of using it when it's needed for fundraising purposes.
We definitely have heard that feedback in our communities. I think just the most disappointing thing is the whole us and them. Oh my gosh, come on guys, we've got enough bigger problems to worry about. Let's not be digging our own hole here. So look, without a doubt, it has been disturbing, it has been unhelpful, but what I am pleased at is this tourism policy statement is not only saying, as you mentioned, yes, this will be beneficial for us to use Māori. This is saying this will be beneficial for us to partner with Māori. We need to understand that there is not only land, but also waters that could be unlocked. And we can't underestimate that we have a number of different threats, biosecurity, we've got potential golden clams, you've got wallabies running through our forests. These are very expensive problems. Why not partner with all people that are landowners, not just Department of Conservation land, but also the many iwi across our country? And I guarantee you, just as we've found in Rotorua, when you partner with them, when you do shared aspirations, everybody wins. I know we're talking about tourism, but you are right. Our culture is really important. It needs to be meaningful. It needs to be authentic, but it needs to be supported. And I do thank Minister Louise Upson for her genuine support in that.
The report is very clear on stating whose job it is to do what. It divides up the issues and assigns central government, local councils and the tourism industry either lead, partner or enabler labels. Tanya welcomes getting some strong guidelines.
This is always the problem. Politicians, for not only decades, centuries, they go, it's your job, it's your job. This does lay it out, it does make it clear, but it also includes tourism and industry. And so by looking at it, we can clearly say, yes, this is the focus of council, this is what we will focus on. But that also means that we can, again, reflect back to the government that if they want us to deliver these things that we look after, they should also be coming to the table and listening to us when we need national level policy legislation change to actually bring in these tools. So we can set our own rates, but we do need things like registers. We can set local rates, but we do need government support to enable accommodation levies. So although it's saying this is definitely your job, not mine, this is your lane, it's also saying, but as we continue to work on these, to progress on these, at the end of this, there's a shared outcome of growing tourism. And, in a time where there is a lot of political instability and too many crises to bloom and remember, it is important that we are focused on what are we trying to achieve out of all of this. And that's what I do like about clearly identifying, if that's your lane, we'll focus on ours and we'll all be better off for it because we all have limited time, energy and resource.
And resourcing is a concern too from David Simmons.
Where are local government going to find the resources to do this? How are they going to be able to focus on doing this when at the same time they are under review and that there is incredible pressure on rates? So I think, again, that the structure is right, but the next steps as to how it is going to work and how it's going to be rolled out will be crucial.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production with support from RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Ben Pearce. Thanks to Tanya Tapsell and David Simmons. I'm Alexia Russell. Mā te wā.